Do you believe an NFL player like Jonathon Martin can be bullied? Or is bullying in the NFL an oxymoron? Do you think adults can be bullied just like kids are? And is there bullying in your workplace? Tell us what you think about bullying in the NFL right now on It's Your Call. They are pro football players, rough, tough, strong, and mean. But did one of them take it too far? Is one a bully and the other a victim? Well, the NFL is asking that very question as it investigates accusations of bullying against Richie Incognito of the Miami Dolphins. And it's the topic of our debate here today on It's Your Call. Hello, everyone. I'm Lynn Doyle. So let me ask you, do you think it's possible for one NFLer to actually bully another player? Or is all that macho talk just part of their everyday work environment? Do you think Jonathon Martin is being a wuss? Or does he actually have a case against Incognito? That is our very first question to you this hour. Tell me who you're supporting in this situation. Is it Incognito or do you think Martin? Who is right and who is wrong? If you want to weigh in, you can email me right now at lynn@lynndoyle.net. David Walker is an attorney and a former college football player. His Philadelphia law practice focuses primarily on criminal defense, and he played college football at Stanford University. That's the same university where Jonathon Martin played. Nice to have you with us, David.
Nice to be here.
I'm going to put you on the hot spot right away. Sure. Is Jonathon Martin being a wuss here, or do you think he actually has a case that he's been the victim of bullying?
Well, anyone who would call Jonathon Martin a wuss is completely mistaken. They're wrong about that, and here's why. First of all, the young man went to Stanford, played football at one of the best schools in the country, excelled, made himself a second-round draft pick, guarded Andrew Luck's blind side, possibly the best quarterback in the National Football League right now. He is not a wuss by any means, way, or matter. Can't be.
So is then Richie Incognito a bully, or was he just doing his job?
No, Richie Incognito was doing far from his job, and I think if you really went around the NFL, they would say that people like Richie Incognito should not be where he was in a position of leadership with the Miami Dolphins. They put him on their leadership council. The guy's been thrown off teams, the Rams, Nebraska, Oregon, just to name a few, in both colleges and a pro team. And now he's somehow a leader in the Miami Dolphins locker room. Jonathon Martin was dropped into a warped, bizarro world that Richie Incognito was leading in the Miami Dolphins locker room.
But he is not the only one who's been dropped into that world, and he's not the only one in the Miami Dolphin organization or elsewhere around the country and all the other NFL teams that face this kind of hazing, this kind of ritual from the vets. Why is this particular case causing so much controversy?
It is for a couple reasons, Lynn. And Richie Incognito is at the far end of the spectrum, and Jonathon Martin is at the other end of the spectrum. Here you have Jonathon Martin, a kid who doesn't have a blip on the radar screen, done everything the right way conventionally. You have Richie Incognito, who can't even stay with the program. Everything Richie Incognito does ends in a mess. That's his track record. If that's who you are, that's who he is. So no, Jonathon Martin is not is someone who is being a wuss or soft, and everyone doesn't experience what Richie Incognito's done. That is far beyond normal hazing, as the NFL or even other sports teams like to call it, is something that is inclusive at the end of the day. This was all meant to ostracize Martin.
The part that really confuses a lot of people, and maybe you're one of them, is the fact that they appeared to be good friends, or at least that is the perception that they were good friends. We want to know what you think about this, so if you want to join in, please do so. Email me at lynn@lynndoyle.net. We're going to go to Gerald Colton, who is an attorney and a sports agent who represents several NFL players. He also teaches and lectures about sports law. He's an old friend of the show. It's great to have you back with us.
Great to be here, Lynn.
I have been dying to know what you've been thinking about this situation because you work every single day with NFL players. What's your take?
Lynn, there's so many different sides to this, and each one of those could be a show in and of themselves. I mean, one of the things you say, was Richie Incognito just doing his job? Well, the job of an NFL player is different than most people's, both in the nature of that it's, when you step on the field, it's violent, and things that aren't allowed in society happen, but there's also all these other factors to it that aren't necessarily really the job. The whole locker room component is part of their workplace, but that's not actually what they're paid for. And so, as a result, there's things that happen in football that are permitted that would never be permitted in normal workplaces. And I've waited for a long time for American law to cross over with the NFL and us to look at it as a workplace, as it would in any court of law. And the fact is, what is permitted to go on in football is outside the spectrum of American law in a lot of ways, and all this bullying and the hostile work environment is now under a microscope and will probably change the face of the way things are done in locker rooms.
You know, it's interesting that you make that point, because we are going to talk later in the show about how this so-called bullying actually happens in everyday people's lives, and we're going to give them some suggestions on how to deal with it. Right now, though, I want to get our viewers involved, as we always do. We want to know who you're siding with in this NFL bullying case. So are you on Jonathon Martin's side, or do you think Richie Incognito is getting a bad rap? And isn't the NFL all one big bully fest? Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me like that's what they get paid to do week in and week out. And finally, we want to know if adults really can be bullied. Do you think that's just something that happens to kids, or have you seen it or maybe even experienced it in your own workplace? If you want to get involved, you can email me directly at lynn@lynndoyle.net. You can also find us on Facebook, and you can follow me on Twitter. We're already getting a huge response to our questions, so let's check in right away with Facebook and give you a sampling of what some of our viewers have to say. Pat says, it is possible to be bullied anywhere in every line of work. I've had people try to bully me at a couple of different jobs. Christy says, I have 5 brothers, and their advice would be toughen up or get another career. But we all have to deal with other people at any job. And Marcus Thomas, you may remember him, he writes, hey Lynn, we talked on air before when we signed Michael Vick at the Eagles. It is possible to get bullied in the NFL. Some vets take advantage of the rookies, and they take things too far. So I'm going to return back to the gentleman and say, what do you think of that? Christy says her brothers would say, hey, toughen up. You know, you are being a wuss. And then Pat says it's happened to him. He's not an NFL player. And Marcus, who was in the NFL, say absolutely this happens.
Well, then people look at them because of what they do is so violent in nature, and they're so big and so strong. And it's really that whole macho world. When they step on the field, that's what people see. But we have a whole continuum of sensitivities that are in human beings. And a lot of these guys, despite the fact that they look so big and strong and are so tough, may be the nicest people off the field, and that sort of divergence can create an interesting group in a locker room, but no place is there for someone to be treated like garbage. And you just have, as was pointed out by David earlier, you have probably a hypersensitive guy, and normally those guys don't quite reach that level because of the nature of the way the football culture is. By the same token, he's still allowed to be that type of person, and it's really unfortunate this all happened.
Well, I have to point out one thing that we haven't talked about that we're going to, and that is that this case, like so many others that we talk about on this show, has racial overtones. I mean, you know, we've heard the tape that came out of the answering machine. We've heard about some of the language that's used in the locker room, and we want to know what you think about that. So if you want to join in, if you say, okay, it's fine in the locker room, but then you can't bring it outside, does that send a mixed message? We're going to get some comment on that and get your thoughts. But first, I want to bring in our other guests. We have Dr. Sue Kornbluth with us, who is a clinical psychologist and a professor of psychology at Temple University. And of course, we have back with us Robin Bond, who is an employment attorney and founder of the law firm Transition Strategies, LLC, in Wayne, Pennsylvania. It represents employees in all aspects of workplace-related legal matters. She is also the author of a new book called How to Negotiate a Killer Job Offer, available now on Amazon.com. Did I model for that cover? That's a great looking cover. Okay, I'm going to read this book and have some questions for you later. Right. But I want to get you guys your take on this whole situation, particularly the fact that Gerald brought up it's not necessarily what's happening in the NFL is not necessarily what would have been allowed to happen in the workplace legally, from a legal perspective. Is that true?
Well, that's true. You know, we talk about bullying really is not illegal in most instances. In fact, bullying, we talk about as intimidating another person or humiliating them, whether it's verbal or physical, what the case may be. But it's not illegal unless it crosses over the line and you are bullying someone because of their membership in a protected class, their age, race, religion, color, national origin, gender, or age. And in this case, the racial overtones make it protected speech, and therefore bullying that could be illegal activity and cross over into a hostile work environment.
It seems to me, and maybe I'm being naive, but it seems to me that the whole NFL is a hostile work environment. I mean, I love football as much as the next gal, but I mean, seriously, They don't say, hello, how are you? It's so nice to see you. Let's have some tea.
Well, but many people are going to tell you this is very aberrant behavior, and most NFL teams are not having a culture like this.
Yeah, I've been in that locker room. They're lying.
I'm going to take another perspective and look at it from the psychological perspective on actually what bullying is. And bullying is any intentional effort you make to hurt another individual. It is a direct effort to do that. And from what I've read and what I've seen online about this, that seems to be what has happened here between Incognito and Martin.
And every other player in the league, right? I mean, to deliberately try to set out to hurt someone, isn't that what Sunday afternoon is all about?
Well,
it is.
Where do you draw the line?
When it becomes racial, perhaps, where a racial term that is used towards another person has a different emotional charge for a person, that they may hear it up front and say, I can blow this off, but later on, when they're alone and they're thinking about that, it can be a different level of being upset.
Is it true, though, that racial slurs, or the so-called N-word, is a regularly used word in NFL locker rooms, or even college locker rooms?
I would say, Lynn, that in certain contexts amongst African American players, it may be used casually more than anywhere else outside a locker room. But even for the African American players, that doesn't make it right. And it certainly doesn't make it right when someone who, as Richie Incognito, somehow thinks he's associated, or another player called him an honorary black person, for a guy like Richie Incognito to use it in a derogatory term in reference to Jonathon Martin and his family is way out of line. Way out of line.
All right, we're going to find out if our viewers agree with you. We have to talk about the racial aspect of this case. Not only is it bullying being alleged in the NFL, but then we have to talk about the issue of using the so-called N-word in a certain environment and having it accepted, and then the message that it sends when you're outside as well. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to share your thoughts on that and more. Stay with us.
What's perceived is that Richie's this psychopath, racist maniac, right? And the reality is that Richie was a pretty good teammate, and that Richie and Jonathon Martin were friends.
Welcome back, everyone. That's what Tyson Clabo had to say about this so-called bullying accusation that's been dominating conversation in the NFL the last couple of weeks. We've given you a chance to discuss it as well. So if you want to join in, you can email me at lynn@lynndoyle.net. You can also find us on Facebook, and you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Lynn Doyle TV. Isn't that creative and clever? Okay, let's go to our Facebook page and see what you guys have to say. Thomas has said, Incognito pushed it way too far. He thought he was untouchable. But yes, I do agree. Bullying is everywhere, including in the NFL. Stephen says, too much emphasis has been put on the so-called bullying, and it's driving me crazy. It's parents that need to teach their kids how to deal with bullies and boost their self-esteem. And Pete says, no, there's no such thing as bullying in the NFL. However, I think neither man handled it the way it should have been handled. What do you think about that? Feel free to share your opinions with us. I'm going to turn back to Robin and talk about this so-called hostile environment that now Jonathon Martin is alleging was created as a result of this one individual. How do you go about proving that it's been a hostile work environment?
Oh, well, you'd have to prove basically that the environment was so pervasively hostile that no reasonable person should have to work within it. But I'd like to follow up to one of the comments your reader said. And I think that what an obligation that all workers have when they're faced in this kind of environment is, what do you do about it? Or how do you raise your concerns? And within the Martin Incognito environment, did Martin ever go to his agent or say, hey, can you help me out here? Go to his legal counsel or say, can I help me out? Could you have gone to, like Gerald, could somebody have gone to you and said, hey, help me out here. What can I do about this situation? Because I think when they say within the NFL, learn to work it out or work it out amongst yourselves, there's some merit to that, saying, how can I deal within the environment that I have before it blows up and gets crazy out of control?
Well, do we know if that information has been made public yet? We don't know what steps
no,
he
they're
took, to my
investigating.
understanding.
The NFL's hired an attorney to go and investigate, hear both sides. And we actually haven't heard Martin make allegations per se, just the facts have come out and he's undergoing treatment. But if I got that call, Robin, from one of my clients, hey, I'm having trouble with a teammate. If I would never call management because my guy is going to look bad.
Right.
Football culture kind of allows things to go on. And here's what I have really heard. And when things like this happen, I always go to my players. I represent players for over 20 years in the NFL. And they have a different take than all of us usually do. And their main take on this is that this is why stuff should never get out of the locker room. And that is that there are a different set of rules that apply in the NFL, and things go on, and they have to keep it in-house. Once this comes out, now all the labor lawyers will come in, and the workplace and the work environment will probably change and be under a lot more scrutiny.
Because the courts are going to say, and they're going to say, we don't care. It's a workplace. We don't care if it's an NFL locker room. It's a workplace. And the courts will hold you to the same standards that management had to be awake, and they had to be aware of what was going on. And that's the coaching staff and the guys who are in the locker room that the coach says, hey, tell me what's going on. Those guys in the locker room, they know everything that's going on. The towel guys or the guys that are working, they know all that stuff that's going on. The coaches know what's going on. They have their fingers on the pulse of that team, so they know what's going on.
There's not one guy in a locker room that doesn't want to be looked at as he's macho. So let's just start with that. I mean, that's just human nature. But perhaps there should be somebody on these NFL teams that these players can go to confide in personally, where it doesn't get to the level that a coach has to get involved or other players have to find out. Their feelings and issues should be protected as well.
Well, you heard the Tyson say, a teammate, he thought they were buddies. In fact, we've heard lots of players interviewed that said, we didn't realize that this was happening. So it kind of makes you wonder if there's some piece of this puzzle that we're unaware of at this time.
Good.
Well, I think that's part of the problem with this whole situation is that the culture was pervasive in Miami because Richie Incognito is seen as a leader. There are other teams in the NFL that would not allow this to go on. Peyton Manning's not allowing this to happen in his locker room. Tom Brady's not allowing this to happen in his locker room. So when we say there are ways, and you do break a code of silence when you step outside of the locker room, and certainly not to the media. A lot goes on in a locker room behind closed doors that no one ever knows about. But in this situation, when there was nowhere else, when everyone is saying, oh, Richie Incognito is great. And what they're doing is saying, we like Richie Incognito as a player. And it's a dirty little secret that coaches and even other players want Richie Incognito there on Sunday. But when he blows up and harasses a woman and it's using the N-word, well, now no one wants him. But that is a premium that people get paid for in the NFL.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I have to tell you, we always hear this stuff afterwards.
Always.
No one was complaining about this guy on a talk show like this one or on ESPN or any place else until this came up. And now all of a sudden his list of indiscretions is as long as your arm.
Right, now it's all
it should be
coming out.
done beforehand.
And well, you can do this stuff, the bullying, only so long with a 10-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 50-year-old, whatever, until it gets to the point when a person that is being bullied has enough.
Right, and I think this guy, Martin, probably just put up with this for a long, and he might have been actually pretending it was all okay all this time because he thought he had to. He thought he had to go along with it.
He was pretending he was friends because he thought it's better than trying to fight him.
Because he couldn't fight it.
Yeah, it's one man against him and the rest of the team.
And I wouldn't be surprised if many people in workplaces throughout the country go along with the bully. Because why? What happens when you stand up? What happened right here in the Miami Dolphin team? People attack the victim.
Right.
Well, she's exactly right.
For the precise reason that he was being bullied was perhaps it was a perceived weakness, whether it's in his play, whether it's in being different. And that's one thing that won't ever last in an NFL locker room is if you're perceived as being weak, whether it's on the field or mentally, and they will attack. And they're saying, what they're saying when they say, well, we support Richie, is Richie's strong, and for whatever reason, Jonathan wasn't strong in this incident. In this incident, I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying that's the way to deal with it, because as you said, you can only put up with it so much. It's funny the first week, it's funny the first month. Now we're in the year 2, and you're treating me like you're trying to ostracize me.
But at the same time, didn't the other players on the team also were bullied by Incognito on that day? They were in the cafeteria, and Martin sat down, and they all got up and left. So the question is, too, are they responsible as well for what has gone on here?
And that's the question we're going to ask our viewers. Who do you think is responsible? when something like this happens? Are you blaming the coaches, the management? Is it singularly blamed on Incognito? Or do you think even Martin's to blame because he put up with it, or he gave it up, like he told people about it? I mean, we don't know. We want to know what you think. So give us an email, lynn@lynndoyle.net, and particularly if it's happened to you, I want to hear from you. All right, we're going to continue our conversation as quickly as possible because we are running out of time, and this conversation is one that could go on for the next 2 hours. If you want to tell us what you think about bullying in the NFL, whether you even think that's possible or you think it's an oxymoron, go ahead and email me while we still have some time left. I wanted to have an opportunity to kind of translate what's happened allegedly in the NFL to what might be happening in your workplace, but we're quickly running out of time. So I want to ask our workplace experts what the warning signs are for a regular guy, not a Jonathan Martin, but just a regular gal or guy who thinks that they are the victim of bullying. Can you give us some?
Warning signs? Yes. If you're excluded from meetings, if you walk into the room and other people walk out, if you're the butt of jokes, if nobody wants to have lunch with you, if you were, boss writes you up for the smallest of infractions, if you're bidding on a job and all of a sudden that's viewed as a problem, those kind of things are not normal behaviors for which you should be getting ostracized for.
And what would you suggest to someone, Sue, that thinks or feels that they are being victimized?
Go to somebody that you trust. That can be difficult sometimes because in a workplace you don't know who is very trustworthy. That's why I think sometimes, a lot of these businesses have EAPs where you can go to outside people to get help and talk about your issues and get some coping skills to deal with what is going in the workplace. You have to strategize when you're being bullied.
I think a lot of people are afraid to speak up because they think that they will then become the target of even more criticism. Yeah. Just like Jonathan Martin, we're talking during the break, what's going to happen to this guy now? There's a perception of him because he fought back essentially in a way other than his fist, that now he might be viewed as hands off. We don't want to be part of that. Is that a very real threat or concern?
Well,
not just for him, but for all of us that might speak up.
It goes both ways. The NFL's been willing to put up with Richie Incognito for years because of his skill. Jonathan Martin's skill will win out. Someone will take a shot because he is a natural talent. He hasn't done anything other than crack this code of silence in an NFL locker room. If he wants to play, I think someone will give him that opportunity.
After the Manti Te'o situation, we all talked on this show about, will this guy be able to walk into an NFL locker room and not be the butt of every joke? Right. And apparently he's performing on field and doing his job. Is that what Jonathan Martin needs to do?
Well, I think the standard for Martin's going to be higher than it is for a normal player. I don't think he has to just perform. He has to perform to a superior level. And if he does, he'll be able to play. If he doesn't, I don't think teams are going to want him as just an average player. But it's the converse with Incognito. The coach who drafted him, Mike Moritz, came out and said, look, the reason we picked this guy is because he's nasty. They want to play 3 hours on Sunday in the nastiest trenches that there are in combat. So this is where the convergence of law and NFL locker rooms and the actual game they're paid to play all meet, and it doesn't always sort out well.
We're almost out of time. I'm predicting that there are going to be some changes within the NFL, just like there was with the Archdiocese after that information all came out to light. So when it happens, I want you all to come back and talk about it, will you?
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, David, wonderful to have you with us. Robin, Dr. Sue, always great to see you as well. If you were unable to get through, email me directly at lynn@lynndoyle.net. If you have questions or comments for the crew, I'll make sure that they get them. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.